Welcome to Girl Dad, the podcast. I'm your host, Madeline Anderson, and I'm thrilled to bring you honest conversations with dads and daughters, sharing heartfelt stories, actionable advice, and real daughter perspectives that will help you be the best girl dad you can be. Hey, and welcome back to Girl Dad, the podcast. I'm your host, Madeline Anderson, and today we have a deep dive on some of the takeaways from the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. This book is written by John Gray, and the context is primarily romantic relationships between men and women. But a lot of the takeaways are the same for fathers and daughters because at the end of the day, your daughter is from Venus too. So for today's episode, we will go through 3 examples of typical disconnects between men and women for you to be aware of so that you can understand and connect with your Venusian daughters. So to give you a little bit of context on Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, the author starts the book off by creating this imaginary scenario where all men live on Mars and all women live on Venus. And on Mars, the men value competency, efficiency, logic, solutions, and results. And communication is primarily for sharing information on Mars. Martians also value power and achievement, and their sense of self-worth is typically tied to their ability to produce results and solve problems. So on Mars, offering unsolicited help is actually an insult because it suggests that the person isn't capable of doing it themselves. On Venus, Venusians value feelings, quality of relationships, empathy, expression, and communication. And communication is for sharing connection. So their sense of self-worth is actually tied to their feelings and the quality of their connections. And on Venus, giving advice is a sign of caring because Venusians believe that if you love someone, you help them improve. And in the book, one day, men on Mars saw the women on Venus through a telescope and they fell in love. And the women on Venus knew this day would come because their intuition. And then the Martians started traveling to Venus to get to know them. They learned about their differences and their ways of thought, and they really enjoyed each other's company. But then they decided to go together to Earth to live there. And when they got there, they had selective amnesia and they forgot where they came from and how their worlds were different. And this caused a ton of issues with communication and love and connection and understanding one another. So that's the context of this theme of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And my goal for this episode is not to change you in typical Venus fashion, but it's really just to remind you of our differences to help you understand and connect with your daughter whose origin is Venus. And the great thing about this episode is that it applies to daughters of all ages. And if you have a wife or a sister, they are from Venus too. So as I mentioned earlier, we will go through 3 different scenarios where there can be disconnect between men and women or fathers and daughters. And the first one is called the Mr. Fix-It trap. And this is something that is talked about a lot in the book. But essentially, the Martian instinct is to solve problems. And when a daughter has a problem, dads want to slay the dragon, kill the dragon. They want to fix the problem, right? This is how you show your love. There's no issue with this. The issue is that there's typically a disconnect between what is actually wanted from the woman perspective or your daughter's perspective. So the typical Venusian need is a daughter's not actually looking for a solution. She's looking to not be alone in this feeling. So remember how on Venus, communication is a sense of love. So a lot of times, daughters will come to their dads or wives go to their husbands looking for support and empathy and connection and love, not necessarily for a problem to be solved. And that is challenging for fathers and husbands because their natural instinct is to solve the problem. And it's not really in your DNA to communicate, to show your love. You want to help, which is a great thing. And the thing about this is it's not about right and wrong. You're not doing the wrong thing by wanting to solve the problem. It's just not what your daughter might be looking for. So she may be left feeling like the problem hasn't been solved, because really the problem is her feelings and her emotions. And so if you can focus on solving that problem by simply sitting with her, validating her feelings, talking with her, asking the right questions, then you do solve the problem. So the end goal is the same. It's to make her feel better. But in your mind, you may see a very obvious solution. It's like, oh, just do this. And by doing so, her feelings haven't changed. In her mind, nothing has been solved. She might actually feel more disconnected because it almost seems like you're not listening to her or you're not understanding what she's going through. When really, you love her, you want the best for her, you're trying to help her, you're trying to listen to her, but the obvious answer is clear. And so you point to that answer, but really, that wasn't the initial problem to begin with. And when you offer a solution too quickly, it actually makes the daughter or the woman feel dismissed. It almost feels like you're trying to just close this tab on our emotions because they're too messy or too complicated. And then it leaves us feeling worse, which again, not your fault. It's just a difference between how your brain is wired and how our brains are wired. And the good news is I'm not just going to leave you hanging and say good luck. And there's two ways that you can go about this. The first one is simply just asking her, do you need me to be a fixer or a listener right now? And that should give you some clarity on which direction to take the conversation. And if she says a listener, then option 2 is to use the valve strategy, which is something I created because it sounds like something that you might need to fix. And it stands for validate, ask, listen, validate, execute. So for example, if your daughter came to you and she said, there's a girl that I'm friends with and she's been kind of mean to me and I just don't know what to do. It's really hurting my feelings. The first thing you do is validate. So, wow, that sounds like it might be hurtful. Just kind of almost repeat back what she is saying and validate that emotion. And then the next one is ask. So, when did this start? Or any sort of question related to this. Because at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're trying to dig deeper into this scenario so that you have more context as to what she's feeling, what she's thinking, and what she wants from you in that moment. And then the next thing is listen. So just let her talk. Listen. You might even ask a few more questions and just kind of sit with her in that moment. And then the last part is to validate and then execute. So this is where you kind of recap her emotions, you revalidate that it's okay for her to feel that way and that makes sense that she feels that way. And then when it comes to executing, that's when you provide a solution if it's warranted or if it makes sense. So for some scenarios, she's just looking to kind of talk about things and really feel better about them, because when she bottles it up, because she's so emotionally driven, it can really cause unease and anxiety and just terrible feelings. But if she communicates it and almost just speaks her feelings out loud, she releases those emotions. So sometimes the solution is just you listening and talking to her so that she feels better. But sometimes she's asking for a real execution of the solution, right? So maybe there's a real answer where it's like, don't invite her to your birthday party. Like maybe there's a context around timing where she wants your advice on whether or not an action should be taken, right? So that's when you do it at the end. But for example, if she says, hey dad, this girl is my friend, but she's kind of mean to me. Should I invite her to my birthday party? And you jump into straight, no, you shouldn't. Even though maybe that's the answer that you give her eventually, that process of validating and asking questions and listening and asking more questions and validating again, that is what solves her emotion. And that's what solves the feeling that she's feeling that she doesn't want to be feeling anymore. The actual solution, she probably already knows it, but it's really helpful to hear you say that too, because she wants to be aligned with you. She wants your advice and she values your opinion, but she wants to feel better at the same time. And when you're in the state of validating, sometimes you just say, that's unfair, or I can see why you're so mad, or I can see why you're so sad. I think really it's just reinforcing that it's okay that she feels that way because she doesn't want to. And it's all temporary, as we'll discuss later, but it's just about solving that emotion in that moment. So the second major disconnect is the point system. And this will be very valuable for romantic relationships as well. So there's a mathematical mismatch in the point system. And obviously, the point system is when you do something for someone and you get a point or 20 points, depending on which planet you come from. So on Mars, or the Martian math is if you give a huge gift and put a lot of effort into it or it costs a lot of money, that's 100 points, right? Like big vacation, 100 points. The issue is that Venusian math works a little bit differently. So a huge gift is 1 point. A morning text saying, "Good morning, I love you," that's also 1 point. A hug is 1 point, okay? I love you is 1 point. Flowers are 1 point. So the disconnect there is because oftentimes men will do something really, really thoughtful and nice or expensive or something kind of big in their minds where they were like, wow, that took a lot of effort and energy, and they get 1 point for it. And I can imagine quite frustrating for you because it's like, I just did that last week. Like, why are you thinking we never go on dates or, never spend time together as a father-daughter? We just went on a father-daughter trip. But the thing is, if you aren't consistently doing things that get points, in a woman's mind, in a Venusian mind, you are disconnected. It feels like you don't care or that you're not thinking of your daughter or partner. So the solution is to just make sure you have at least 1 point a day. And again, that can just be a long hug or, I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. Like those words mean so much to a woman. And I know that they are obvious to a man because it's like, of course, but you are very logic driven. And for you, if it makes sense, it may not make sense to us. So just because you aren't saying it doesn't mean that you don't feel it. But on Venus, communication is our sense of love, right? We need to express ourselves and we need to communicate to feel connected. And so when there's a lack of that, we feel disconnected. The book actually has 101 ways to score points with a woman, but I'll just read some of these because there are so many ways that you can achieve these points. And I think the main takeaway here is just consistent small efforts go farther than rare big ones. So, upon returning home, find her first before doing anything else and give her a hug. Ask her specific questions about her day that indicate an awareness of what she was planning to do. So, for example, how did your appointment with the doctor go? Or how did that test go at school? One of these is resist the temptation to solve her problems. Empathize instead. We already went over that. Bring her cut flowers as a surprise. Compliment her on how she looks. Validate her feelings when she's feeling upset. Offer to help her when she's tired. When you are going to be late, call her and let her know. When you need to pull away, let her know you will be back or that you need some time to think about things. Be patient when she is sharing. Don't look at your watch. And I would say don't look at your phone too. Create occasions where you can both dress up. Take pictures of her on special occasions. Let her see that you carry a picture of her in your wallet and update it from time to time. Open the door for her. Offer to carry heavy boxes for her. When you're listening to her, use eye contact. And ask her how she is feeling. So those are all ways that you can earn points. And I hate to say this because I know it might stress you out, but the points do kind of start over every day. So what you did yesterday is almost irrelevant to today. And again, it's those little consistent actions that builds the connection for the relationship, not those big or extravagant or one-off things that maybe take way more energy and time and money from you than these little things do. And it's so funny because as I was reading these ways that men can score points with women, I was like, oh my gosh, these are so true. I can't wait to hear how I can score points with my husband, with men. And when I got to that section, I was shocked because it has It's just very different. And I'll read you a few just to kind of see if you agree, and let me know because I'm so curious. But it says how women can score big with men. So you don't do 1 point. There's a variation of points according to this book. And for example, he makes a mistake and she doesn't say, I told you so, or offer advice. And that's 10 to 20 points. He gets lost while driving and she doesn't make a big deal out of it. 10 to 20 points. He forgets where he puts his keys and she doesn't look at him as though he was irresponsible. 10 to 20 points. And she asks for his support rather than dwelling on what he has done wrong. 10 to 20 points. So it's very interesting because this all has to do with, if you think back to kind of like Mars and how men operate on Mars, they don't critique others, right? That's a sign of weakness. And I think what this is saying is that it's really natural for women to react these different ways to men. And it's very negative for the man to experience. And that might make perfect sense to you. And you're like, yes, this is so true. But I think this is kind of eye opening for women, the same way that some of the other things that we've been talking about may be eye opening for you. And so this is a great opportunity to even help your daughter understand how you think and operate. Because I believe at the end of the day, awareness of our differences solves all the problems, right? Like if we understand that we're not the same and you have natural tendencies to think and act and feel this way, and we have natural tendencies to think and act and feel another way, but if we are able to appreciate those differences and communicate with one another the way that we need to, it just creates a more amicable relationship and a peaceful household. So just to recap the point system, remember that you do not need to be a superhero once a year. You just have to be her dad every day. She doesn't want the once a year guy. And even little things like saying good luck on your math test or bringing her a glass of water while she's studying. These little things go so far and they allow her to feel extremely connected to you. And I think some dads get frustrated because they feel underappreciated. And usually that's when they are doing these big things, but then they forget all the little things. So it's more impactful to focus on those little things and thinking of ways to show your daughter that you're thinking of her every day. Okay, so situation number 3 is the wave versus the cave. And you may have heard this before, but women's emotions operate like waves. So sometimes there are crashes and sometimes it's smooth waves and sometimes there's just big waves and rolling emotions, but that's just how women operate. And if you haven't listened to my solo episode on the female hormone cycle, that will help kind of explain some of these waves, but some of these waves don't really have to do with hormones. It's just really how our brains are wired. So when a woman from Venus is feeling stressed, she feels this wave of emotion and she needs to talk about her feelings. Talking about whatever is going on is usually how to calm down that wave of emotions. And remember, she's looking typically for validation, empathy, and really just the sense that she's being heard and understood. And a woman's self-esteem actually rises and falls like a wave. Some days your daughter may feel really good about herself, and others she's feeling extremely down on herself. And it may not make any sense to you because she looks the same, it's within the same week potentially, but that's just how it is. And so being there as her rock, which I think that's really what that analogy comes from. It's like rocks are stable, they're steady, and women are not rocks. Men may say she's my rock, but I don't think that's ever really accurate. Men are the rocks, women are the waves, and they support men in all kinds of amazing ways, but men are the rocks. Let's be real. So be her rock, be her stable sense of support, reason, and validate her when she's going through these waves of emotions. Now, I said waves and caves, so the cave is where men go to kind of retreat. And the disconnect here is sometimes it's happening at the same time. So there's a wave of emotions and a dad's sense might be, oh, what do I do here? I'm going to go to my cave. But if you go to your cave when your daughter is experiencing a wave, it may make her feel like her emotions are too much for you to handle, and it might make her feel even more insecure. So the strategy here is really just to stay on shore. If there's a wave, let it ride out, wait for the tide to go back out. And remember, it's probably not a situation where you need to solve that wave or solve her problems. You may just need to let her feel it out and go back to that valve strategy. Validate, ask, listen, validate, execute. Another way to kind of help navigate these waves is to, instead of asking, what's wrong, because usually that requires logic and that means you're going to be having a solution ready for her, just say, I'm right here if you want to talk. Because to her, when she hears that, she hears, he's got me. He's got my back. I'm supported. I'm loved. I'm connected to him. And if you ask what's wrong, she may feel, oh, there is something wrong with me. I shouldn't be feeling this way. My feelings are embarrassing. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to talk about it. And it might turn into something where there's more emotions or the emotions aren't settled. So I know this might sound crazy to you because you as men are logic driven and we are just so emotionally driven. But that's, again, what makes us so different in beautiful ways. But understanding how we operate helps you connect better with your daughter because you can learn to kind of speak her language. And that's what I try to do in all of my episodes, is try to provide that daughter perspective. But this one is really specific about how different our brains are and how we are wired to communicate differently and take action differently. And on this cave note, men often retreat to their caves. That's what the book talks a lot about, this and how it's completely fine for men to do so. But sometimes women can interpret that as more of a disconnect or they did something wrong. And I think it's just important for dads to be aware of this because you can solve this kind of disconnect by making sure your daughter is aware that you'll be back, even if that seems extremely obvious. But you'll be back and you just need time to do X, Y, Z, and you'll be able to support her when you're out of your cave, whatever that looks like. The author also talks about men being kind of like rubber bands. So they need to pull away and gain distance before they can spring back into intimacy or love or connection. So this isn't a sign of disconnect. It's a natural cycle for men. But from the women's perspective, as you've kind of learned throughout this episode, it can feel very disconnecting. And that's where the communication comes in. So if you need to go take a walk or if you need to go in your office and have a closed session, that is completely valid. But you can avoid any conflict by just kind of giving a expectation around that. So, hey, I'm going to go for a walk for about 30 minutes. I'll be back. I love you. Give some space, give that time, go to your cave, do your thing, come out, be reconnected. So to recap today's conversation, at the end of the day, we are just very different. We are wired differently. We behave differently. We have different styles of communication, and that's a beautiful thing. And to recap those differences, for men, your primary value is achievement and results. Women's primary value is communication and connection. Men's stress response is to withdraw into a cave, and women's stress response is to talk about and share feelings. And for men, the goal of talking is to convey information and to solve problems. And for women, the goal of talking is to bond and feel understood. And men, you need to feel needed and competent. And women need to feel cherished and validated. So just to close out here, I want to say that all of you dads are incredible. Men are incredible. Women are incredible. We are just so different. And to learn how to speak our language just makes our relationship better. I think it's important that we learn your language too, which is why including us in your world and really talking about things and how you think and how you would navigate different situations helps us understand you so that we have that genuine connection. And with that said, to help build your connection, my call to action would be to do one-point task every single day. No big gestures, just all the small, consistent, I love you and I see you moments every day for a week. And take note of how your daughter reacts. I would love to hear about it via DM or email, so let me know how that goes. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in to Girl Dad, the podcast. If you found today's conversation helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow girl dad. I read every review and truly take your words to heart. To close out, remember, your intentional moments make lasting legacies. See you next week.